My guest is Tobiloba Ajayi, a Nigerian lawyer, writer, and a disability rights advocate. She is a woman living with cerebral palsy, and she shares about her journey of living out God's purpose for her life in spite of her disability. Tonight on James Talk Africa. Please like this video and leave a comment below. Let's know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell button and share this video with somebody else.
From Cape Town to Cairo and from Mogadishu to Dakar, this is James Talk Africa. And now here's your host, Chim Onyibilanma.
Hi there, and welcome to this segment of your show. Like I said in the introduction, my guest today is Tobiloba Ajayi. She's a lawyer, an activist, as well as the CEO of Let's Cerebral Palsy Kids Learn Foundation. Tobi, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jim, for having me.
Tobi, you've become a voice for those living with cerebral palsy, but the truth is that this came from your own life experience. You're someone living with cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
Let's go way back. What was it like growing up with cerebral palsy?
I like to think that I had a pretty normal childhood, apart from the fact that I couldn't do the same things that my peers were doing, aka I couldn't walk, I really couldn't use my hands appropriately. And, you know, I had what we would call crossed eyes, or, you know, in medical terms, strabismus, which was quite obvious. I had a pretty regular childhood. Well, if you discount all of the medical procedures, of course, and all of the stays in and out of the hospital, my parents were busy raising the child they had, and they weren't raising a disability. So I was pretty much having fun. I'm the fourth of 4 children, so you can imagine how boisterous a household of 4 kids can be. And so I had a really fun childhood.
Now, when we say cerebral palsy, sometimes people don't know what it is. I have a daughter living with cerebral palsy.
Oh, okay.
And tell us a bit, for those who don't know, what cerebral palsy, how does it manifest?
Okay, so let's backtrack. Cerebral palsy, cerebral meaning brain, right? Palsy meaning the inability to control muscles. So when you put that together, basically, cerebral palsy is the inability to control your muscles that is caused by damage to the parts of the brain that control the muscles, sometimes during pregnancy, during delivery, or within the first 3 years of life. So it's not that complex. It just means that sometime during the first 3 years of life or during gestation, a child's brain, that's the muscle control parts of the brain. And I like to deliberately repeat this because there's this assumption that because something is cerebral, it means that it is intellectual. And I always want people to know that the fact that somebody is has cerebral palsy doesn't mean that they're intellectually impaired. There's that assumption that I really like to debunk quickly. It's the parts of the brain that control muscles that are damaged in cerebral palsy, and then it manifests in the body depending on what parts of the brain, get the affectation. And that's why anything that can be controlled by muscles or that is controlled by muscles can be affected by cerebral palsy. So therefore, you can meet people with cerebral palsy like me who can talk, and you can meet people with cerebral palsy who have no speech. You can meet people with cerebral palsy who can walk pretty well, and then you meet someone like me who doesn't really walk well. You can meet people with cerebral palsy who have hearing impairments. You can meet people with cerebral palsy who have visual impairments. It's actually very common. Visual impairments are common because we tend to have a lazy eye. The muscles of our eyes just don't work as well, and so it affects eyesight. It can affect everything from how you even process sensation. So I'm known in my house to be the one who overheats. I get hurt very easily because I don't necessarily process sensation the way that everybody else processes sensation. So cerebral palsy manifests individually in every person that has it. So if you line up 15 people with cerebral palsy right here today, you're going to see 15 different manifestations. And I'm sure you can, attest to this, Chim. I'm sure you're looking at your daughter and looking at me and you're like, okay, how do you two have the same diagnosis? And that's kind of how cerebral palsy is. And I think that's what makes my work interesting, is the fact that there's never a dull moment, because every child you see is an individual. We don't look the same. We don't have the same needs. And so every time that I have to intervene, it's basically it's a clean slate. I can't even assume that I know anything. Like, this child's coming and I'm literally just saying, okay, Tobi, blank slate, you don't know jack. So you're dealing with this person in front of you, and you're dealing with them as they present to you today. So everything you think you know about cerebral palsy, like, be in it right now. And so that makes my work very interesting.
You're a high achiever. So I'm going to read out some. You're a lawyer.
Yes.
You have a master's degree in international law from the University of Hertfordshire
Yes,
in the UK.
Yes, I do.
You we've been awarded a Mandela Washington Fellowship.
Yes, in
And
2016.
you were one of the people who worked on and created the Lagos State Disability
Law, yes.
And on and on and on. You're an author.
Yes.
You work on different foundations and you're involved nationwide.
Yeah.
Where's the root of this? Where did this root of high achievement come from? Because I read the story of how you went into university and became a top student, where everybody thought.
Oh yeah.
So where does that drive come from to be?
I think it comes from my family.
So what did they do right? What did your parents do right?
First of all, again, I will repeat this. My parents were raising a child. They were not raising a disability.
So they were not looking at you as a child with disability.
Absolutely
they were just saying,
not.
this is a
child. This is a human being that God gave us. We're going to raise this child the same way we're raising the remaining three. So we're not going to be in denial that this child is different. Now, this is where my parents, I think, balanced each other out. My mom was in the medical field, so it was easy for her to get very fixated on all the physical difficulties. My child is not walking, my child can't use her hands, or her eyes look funny. It's very easy for her to get fixated on that. But the thing with that is that it also puts her in that place where she's able to start thinking, what can we do to improve this? My dad, on the other hand, was this person who was just a technical guy. He studied urban and regional planning. So he's a technical, I want to do something. What can we do with what we have? That's the way he thinks. So he's there thinking, okay, fine, this child can't do all these things, but what can she do? And the one thing that was clear very early on was that I could speak. I've always been able to speak very clearly. I've always had a very strong voice, very loud. My dad said my voice was so loud. That was like my defense mechanism as a child. So anybody tries to cheat me, I'm just going to scream. Like, we're just going to know something's going on. So my dad said, look, if this child has a voice that she can use, and it tells us that, and she can speak, so we know that she's cognitively competent, I'm just going to focus on the strengths that she has. And I'm not going to stop you, that's my mom now, from trying to improve the weaknesses, but we're not going to stop one for the other. So we're going to do both at the same time. My child is going to be getting an education while, you're doing all this, your medical rigmarole, you want to do therapy, you want to try this surgery, you want to whatever. Go ahead, bring me the bill, but my child is going to be getting an education. And my mom, right, she already had a mantra. So she had a mantra for all her kids. All my siblings are high achievers. When people say I'm a high achiever, I laugh. I'm like, you don't know my family. You need to meet my siblings. Then you realize that, man, I'm the runt of this family ladder. I did not try. My siblings are rock stars. And so it's kind of a family legacy of just raising rock stars. So when people try to, I'm like, you guys don't get. As far as my family is concerned, I'm not all that. Like, my siblings are like, what are they hyping? It's not like she's that smart. She didn't even finish with the first class. Well, what's all this hype about? Because for them, you don't really know that much. Because in our family, we were raised to do amazing work. My parents would tell you, you either come home with an A or you don't come home at all. Like, it's A's or nothing, my friend. Let's be guided. I was probably the only one who would come home with B's, and my dad would somehow just let it slide, because it's like, okay, we understand that you have a little bit of difficulty with writing and stuff. But my mom, if I came home with a B, she'd remind me, and she'd say it in Yoruba, but I would try to translate. And she would basically say to me, listen, come here. And then once you move close to her, she pulls your ear and she says, listen to me. It is your legs that are impaired, not your brain. So therefore, hear me. You had better use that brain to compensate for the things that your legs cannot do. And look, if you behave like somebody that has cognitive issues, I will beat those cognitive issues out of you. You hear me? And I'll be like, yes, mommy. She's like, good. Now go to that school and go and show them what you can do. Yes, mommy. And of course, you do not try a Nigerian mother. Look, if a Nigerian mother gives you a warning, you better take it, because she's not playing. And when you hear that, and I heard it all the time, my mom constantly said it to me. Every time that I came across something that was difficult in school and I came home and I said, Mommy, I can't do this, she's like, listen to me. Your legs are impaired, your brain is not. Figure it out. Your legs are impaired, your brain is not. Figure it out. And because I was constantly told to figure it out, it became the mantra at which I lived my life. I constantly figure it out, up till today. I constantly say to myself, okay, so my muscles are impaired, my brain is not. I can figure it out. And so I still figure it out. And that's why when people say that it's high achieving, I say it's just figuring it out every step of the way. And that's how I've gotten here.
I guess this was the foundation of all of the fiber of strength, because I was reading the story of when you walked in and dared to say you're going to get a degree in law.
Oh, yeah.
Some professors actually called you, or some lecturers called you to say, tell us about that and what it did in you.
I don't know. I mean, at this time, I think they were dealing with the wrong person. I had finished secondary school, and of course, my dad had gotten into my head that I was going to study law because all this talking cannot just go to waste. Like,
go and use it somewhere.
As in, we cannot be talking for it has to be useful. Use it for something. So go and study law, my friend. So yeah, I had gotten into my head I was going to study law, and thankfully we had found, again, when you have a child like me, your considerations become multiple. So I had written JAMB, and I had put in a federal university that I wanted to go to. So my dad, knowing the data he had, he drove to the school, right? He looked around and he knew that there was no way I was going to survive there. Not because I wasn't cognitively competent, but because the environment was going to kill me. So he started to pray. He didn't tell me this because you don't build up a child and then dash their hopes, right? I mean, you don't do all of that work to build up this child to the point where she already kind of assumes she's going to university and then dash it. So my dad's like, no, it's not dashing. We just have to find a way to make sure she still goes. So he started praying. He started really saying, God, you did not give me this child. Every step of the way, you showed me what to do. Please show me what to do here. This child needs to go to university. And so we're home, it's after WAEC, and after WAEC in Nigeria, we chill. Like it's chill time before uni starts, right?
That's the exam you take before you go to university. Yeah.
So I taking WAEC, I taking JAMB, I taking GC. What else do you want from me? I was in chill zone. So I was chilling. And then my dad's watching the news one day, and then he suddenly screams, somebody give me a pen. On the news, he had seen a private university, advertising admission. And law was on the courses, on the list of courses that the school was going to admit for. So he quickly took a pen, wrote down all the details, and the next day he drove to the address and picked up a form and then brought it home and said, sit down there and fill that form. And I'm looking and so my sister's like covering the top of the form so I don't see the name of the school. And I'm like, wait, guys, what am I feeling? She's like, just fill it first. And then eventually she takes her hand off and I'm like, wait, what? Okada? Edo State? Where is that? And she's like, don't worry about it. Just fill it. We're not even saying you're going there yet. This is just testing. Let's just test. I mean, just do the exam. If you pass, then we'll think about whether you go there. But of course, my dad knew this was his answer. This was God answering the prayer he had prayed to show him how I could go to university. So he then drove me to Edo State to write the entrance exam for the school. I write it, and the way that the school, I don't know if they still do it the same way till today, but back then what they did was you took the exam, then you literally sat in the hall, and then they came, marked it immediately, and then they came out and just called the names of the people who passed. And then they take you to a different hall, and then they start calling you in for interviews one-on-one. So we just literally sat there, they called my name, they said I passed, and then they moved us to the interview room, and at some point they called my name to go into the room to do the interview. And I'll never forget this because there were 4 men. It was this really long table, 4 men sitting down, and I walked into the room and I could see their jaws just slack, right? Because they hadn't seen a student with a disability trying to come for admission before. And then they look at me and they're like, law? And I'm like, yes. And then they're like, first of all, this school is not built for people like you. I'm like, I do not understand what that means. The guy says, okay, let me break it down for you. You're not going to be able to last a semester here. I said, oh, that's your problem? Watch me last 5 years. At this time, let me put this in context, I was 17. See, my parents had done so much of a great job of building it was so much confidence. People called it pride. I was like, watch me last 5 years. The guy looks at me and is like, she's sassy and smart, because based on all our grades, I can't officially deny you admission. So I have to give it to you. But here's what I would advise. Don't waste your parents' money. Don't bother coming. I said, can I have my admission letter? I take it. I go out and I give it to my dad, and I never tell him this happened. So he never hears about this. And, he's excited. Finally, his prayer has been answered. His daughter has an admission. She's going to study a dream course, blah, blah, blah. So he's basically, I need to just go and find the money, and I just need to trust God to provide these funds. And so we go in. And I go into school. And I remember one time, it's 100 level. 100 level is the ghetto in any school, right? Because you're borrowing courses from everywhere. So they're constantly moving you from here to there. And one of the days they say, oh, you guys have one GST course, oh, it's happening here, oh, it's no longer happening there. So, we're moving around. And I'm sitting and I'm, backing the entrance to my class. And the dean of the faculty is walking past, and then she's talking to another lecturer, and she's saying, oh, I heard that there's a disabled student in this 100 level class.
And she didn't know you were hearing her.
I was hearing her. And then I was like, yeah, she's like, who was the idiot that did that admission? Like, how is she supposed to survive here in my faculty? Were they dreaming? And I sat there just nodding like, oh my God, these guys do not know what's about to hit them, because I'm coming for you people. But the thing was, we resume. And then I realized that my problems are multifaceted, because I come out of my room, right? No, first we resume. I get into my room. My roommates are fine. They're okay. But I come out of my room the first day. I'm trying to walk to my hostel entrance where you get a cab to go to class. And the next thing I see, girls are jumping out of their rooms in their towels. I'm not even kidding you. They're lining the streets. And what are they doing? They're staring. I'm passing commentary. Like, just passing commentary. How did this one grow up to be this old? How is she not dead? What's she doing here?
Wow.
And I'm like, well, I'm just keeping it moving. Like, I think that I've just always had this ability to just not listen. So I just kept walking, and I walked, went to class, and by the time I was coming back from class, a couple of people had then gone to my room to ask my roommate if I was their roommate. So my roommate said, I guess she's here. And they're like, you guys want to keep that liability. Won't you go and tell the school you don't want her? And my roommate said, like, we don't have a problem with that. She's been here 2 days. She's fine. We're good, right? And that was my reality for the entire first week. Every time I stepped out of my room, I was the attraction of the whole hostel. People would literally line the streets, stare, pass comments, until I think they then appointed a spokesperson. So I think the beginning of the second week, this spokesperson just literally waits for me to come back from class. So basically they now know my routine, right? So she's waiting for me to come back from class, and on my way back, she goes, excuse me. And then I'm like, me? She's like, yes. So I cross and I walk over to her. She's like, what's your name? I tell her. She's like, oh, you're Yoruba? I'm like, yeah. So she's like, do you speak the language? I'm like, yes, I do. She's like, so good. So we can switch this conversation, because this conversation will be better in Yoruba. I was like, go on. And then she asks, basically in Yoruba, like, what are you doing here? I said to her, the same thing you're doing here, getting an education. She says, where do you live, as in at home? I'm like, I live in Lagos. She says, okay, so that means your parents, they must be very wicked people. Because if they brought you all the way from Lagos here, they don't like you. I was like, oh, that's as far as you know. And I mean, I can't help your ignorance, but it's okay. She's like, you're really, really sassy. I was like, I've needed to be to survive if I'm going to deal with people like you. She's like, okay, I'm smart. I was like, I mean, I didn't buy my admission into this school, if you get what I mean. And from that point on, I think she went to go and tell the rest of the crew. And so they stopped staring and heckling me. And so it started to be a thing that was now left with the faculty. So the faculty was waiting for me to fail. And then the first session, 100 level ends, right? Because, you can't throw anybody out until they finish 100. You have to at least finish the first year. So I finished the first year. And then we resumed for the second year. And one of the guys that was on my interview panel, he's the lecturer, he's teaching law of contracts in 200 level. So he comes into class, and I'm sitting on the first row, first seat on the third row. And then he sees me and he's like, you're still here? Like, he couldn't, I don't think he did it on purpose. He just didn't catch himself. It came out of him honestly without thinking, you're still here? I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. So he calls another lecturer and he says, come, give me your matric number. So I give it to him, and he goes, go and get me the results for that matric number for 100 level. So that one comes back, gives it to him. She's like, she's passing. You're actually passing. I'm like, oh, you were waiting for me to fail? Not gonna happen. So my friends at that point are like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, it's water under the bridge, guys. We got this. Let's go. And pretty much, I made it through 5 years of uni in record time, by the way. So, yeah.
What do you? I was going to ask you what you do when you're faced with discrimination, but you've already said it. You
brush it off.
You brush it off.
And if you are in a place, if it's now that I'm older, I consider the person. If it's somebody I can educate, then I educate them. But if it's somebody who's fixed in their mindset, I don't bother. See, Jesus did not die for that level of stress. Can we not just be stressing ourselves? I just move.
How did you encounter Jesus Christ? At what stage?
I grew up, so I'm one of those children that grew up in church. So let's full disclosure, right? My mom was a deaconess in the Baptist church. My father was a member of the executive committee of the church. So you already know that I was born, bred, buttered, and jammed inside church. And the thing with growing up in church, it's a good thing and it can be a bad thing, depends. Because I grew up in church, so a lot of the time I started asking questions early. So me and Jesus needed to start having conversations very early in my life, because I'm like, guy, come sit down. How do you reason this thing? Because there's 4 children in this house. How come I'm the only one that's like this? Because we kind of explain. You gotta explain this thing to me. And I think that pretty much my relationship with Christ really started very early. But I think by the time I was about 15, I actually deliberately and actively gave my life to Christ. I basically said, okay, you know what? At this point, I don't have an idea what you're doing with my life, but it's okay. You can have it. Do whatever you want with it. Have at it. Let's do this. And pretty much, I think that when I think back, that's the thing that has kept me. It's the thing that has made every time that I encountered difficulty, discrimination, living with cerebral palsy is hard. And Chim, I know you know this because you're a child with CPE, so you know it's hard. And there are many days where to even get out of bed is a struggle.
Yeah.
But I'm able to say, look, Lord, you don't make mistakes. So if this is part of your plan, whatever it is, even if I don't understand it, I trust your heart. And that's pretty much what has kept me going. Because people ask me, and if you're a Christian, I just tell you point blank, look, it's Christ. There's no other answer or explanation. It's Christ. Without Christ, not gonna work.
You know what we're going to do, Toby? We're going to stop here, and then next week we'll continue this conversation because just because of our time, but I love what you just said. Yeah. So we'll stop here. I'll see you guys in the second part of this episode. Please like this video and leave a comment below. Let's know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell button and share this video with somebody else.